You know the sound of a country club, the clinking champagne glasses, the low hum of expensive gossip, that perfectly green lawn stretching out for miles. That was my world. The Northgate Country Club wasn't just a place. It was a symbol of success. It was where my friends and I measure our lives in carrots and vacation spots. And in this world, my husband, Mark, was basically a ghost. A sweet, kind, lovable ghost who just didn't fit in. He was a guy with the 10-year-old car, the frayed golf shoes, and a quiet smile that I decided was just a lack of ambition. I loved him, I did. But I was also deeply, profoundly embarrassed by him. I thought his penny pinching was a weakness, a chain holding me back from the life I deserved. I had no idea his quietness wasn't weakness. It was observation. And if frugality wasn't about being poor. It was a war chest. I just wrapped up a particularly sharp takedown of Mark's latest side hustle, some weird data project he worked on at night. My friends, Tiffany and Brenda, were howling with laughter over mimosas on the club terrace. Honestly, I said, swirling my drink, I think he makes just enough to cover his home-brewed coffee. Just then, Mark appeared to say a quick hello before his tea time. He just gave me that gentle smile, kissed my cheek, and walked off, completely ignoring the sting in my words. Or so I thought. Later that day, a thick cream-colored envelope shows up at our house. It's addressed only to him, stamped with the Northgate crest. I figured it was just another reminder about our quarterly minimums. But when he opened it, his face was a total blank. He slid a single sheet of paper out and handed it to me. It was a letter from the club's board, and what I read made my blood run cold. The letter was a formal notice. An emergency meeting for all members was being called. The topic? The imminent sale and transfer of ownership of the Northgate Country Club. My heart started pounding. A sale? We were members, sure, but the kind who paid our dues monthly and just prayed the car would clear. The initiation fee alone had been a massive stretch, a one-time payment we'd saved for years to afford. We weren't the people who bought country clubs. We were the people who were just desperately trying to belong to them. For weeks, the club had been buzzing with rumors, but I'd written it all off as gossip, whispers of financial trouble, of the club struggling to cover its own costs. I once overheard the club president, Richard Hemlock, complaining that the property taxes alone were astronomical. Mark, who was with me, quietly asked, I wonder what the annual tax liability is on a property this size. I literally swatted his arm, totally mortified. Mark, don't be weird. Who even asked that? He just shrugged. But his eyes were scanning the whole property, a flicker of intense calculation in his gaze that I completely missed. My friends and I dissected the news with a kind of morbid thrill. They're probably going to hit us all with a massive assessment to cover the debt. Tiffany shuddered. My husband says the club has huge liabilities. I felt that familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. An assessment was the last thing we could afford. While my friends complained, their husbands were powerful men, bankers, surgeons, developers. They could handle it. My husband was at home trying to fix our dishwasher with a YouTube tutorial. The difference was a constant, dull ache in my life. I was living a champagne life on a beer budget, and the facade was wearing thin. In the weeks before the meeting, Mark got even quieter. His side hustles seemed to ramp up. He was taking late-night calls in his office with the door shut. I once heard him use the term due diligence and scoffed, assuming it was for another one of his little projects. He started taking what he called research trips, coming home with binders full of spreadsheets. I glanced at them once, columns for revenue streams and capital investment, and just felt a wave of pity. It seemed so sad, him playing at being a big-shot businessman in his tiny home office. One night, I found him poring over documents with a Northgate logo at the dining room table. I was instantly irritated. Are you still obsessing over club? I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. Mark, if they raise the dues, we'll just leave? It's not the end of the world. He looked up, and for once, his smile didn't reach his eyes. It's not about the dues, Clarissa. It's about the value. Their books are a mess. They have massive refund liabilities and haven't invested in the infrastructure in years. The whole operation is inefficient. I just stared. The books? What are you talking about? You get a job in their accounting department or something? He sighed and closed the binder. Something like that. I just find it interesting. Well, I find it boring, I said, the condescension just dripping from my voice. And a little desperate. Richard Hemlock and his board know what they're doing. They don't need a part-time data analyst from the suburbs pointing out their mistakes. He didn't say anything. He just gathered his papers, looking like the picture of defeated ambition. Or so I thought. Those weren't the notes of a curious bystander. They were the homework of a prospective buyer. He wasn't just finding it interesting. He was assembling a team of attorneys and financial advisors. Those late-night calls weren't the dead-end clients. They were the brokers and lenders. He was quietly, methodically planning the biggest takeover of my life, right under my nose, completely shielded by my own snobbery. The night of the meeting, the clubhouse was electric. Everyone was there, looking worried. I clutched Mark's arm, feeling wildly out of place in a new dress I couldn't afford, a pathetic attempt to look the part. Mark, in his simple old suit, looked calmer than anyone in the room. I figured he was just clueless. Richard Hemlock took the stage, his face grim. He talked about impossible debt and the board's decision to sell to a private equity firm to avoid bankruptcy. The room started murmuring. He explained the new owners would mean huge changes, higher dues, and end the club as we knew it. However, Hemlock said, pausing for effect, at the 11th hour, a private buyer stepped forward, a buyer who has been studying this club for months, who understands its legacy, a buyer who has agreed to assume all liabilities, eliminate member assessments, and inject the capital to restore Northgate to its former glory. A wave of relief washed over the crowd. People started whispering, guessing which of the club's titans had saved the day. Hemlock smiled. This individual conducted his due diligence with the utmost discretion. He approached us not with arrogance, but with a deep understanding of our operational failures. It is my great honor to introduce you to the new owner of the Northgate Country Club. The room went silent. I scanned the front row, looking for a hero to stand up, and then Mark squeezed my hand, let it go, and started walking toward the stage. The world went into slow motion. I watched him, my Mark, my frugal, unassuming husband, walk past rows of stunned faces. I saw Tiffany's jaw literally drop. I saw Brenda staring, the smirk from that morning frozen on her face. He shook Richard Hemlock's hand and turned to the microphone. He was a different person. The gentleman I knew was gone, replaced by a figure of calm, commanding authority. He spoke about his vision, about financial sustainability, about modernizing the club's business while respecting its traditions. He spoke with a confidence I had never, ever heard from him. And as he spoke, it all hit me. The late-night calls, the business trips, the nerdy questions about property taxes, the binders, my mockery, my pity, my cruel dismissals of his little side hustles. I had been belittling a genius. I had been laughing at the king while I complained about the cost of his castle. In that moment, surrounded by the shocked faces of the people I had tried so hard to impress, I had never felt so small. The ride home was dead silent. I couldn't think of a single word. My mind was just a tornado of shock, humiliation, and a terrifying flicker of awe when we walked into our modest home, a home I now realized he probably paid for in cash. I finally turned to him. "Why?" was all I could choke out. "Why didn't you tell me? You let everyone think you were poor," he finished for me, his voice gentle again, but with an edge of steel I'd never heard before. "Clarissa, your opinion of me was the best camouflage I could have ever asked for. Nobody looks twice at the man with the beat-up car. Nobody suspects a guy who packs his own lunch is securing millions in financing. You and your friends saw what you wanted to see. And while you were all looking down on me, I was looking at the balance sheets." He explained everything. He'd sold a software company years ago, before we met, and had been quietly living off the interest and making smart investments ever since. He saw that private clubs were a struggling industry, ripe for takeovers. He saw Northgate, a place I viewed as a social ladder, as a distressed asset with incredible potential. He made an offer to the board to assume the club's debt in exchange of title, a deal that saved him from ruin and gave him the property for a fraction of its real value. The next few weeks were whiplash. The same friends who had pitted me were now desperate for an invite to the new owner's table. The staff, who I'd often dismissed, now looked at me with new respect. Not for me, but for the man I was married to. Mark was a natural leader. He treated every employee with dignity, learned their names, and listened. He commanded more respect in his first week than the old board had in a decade. Our entire relationship shifted. The power dynamic I thought I controlled was just an illusion. One night, he walked by as I was stressing over our budget and said with playful smile, "Having trouble with the poor budget, honey?" I didn't laugh. I just looked at him. Really looked at him. The man I married wasn't unambitious. He was a shark who had been content to swim like a goldfish. His quietness wasn't a weakness. It was a strategy. And his greatest victory wasn't buying a country club. It was finally showing me who he really was. I had married a king and spent years trying to turn him into a jester. Now, I had to learn how to be his queen. I used to think wealth was about the car you drove and the circles you ran in. Mark taught me that true power is the freedom to not have to prove it to anyone. He didn't buy the club to spite me or show up my friends. He bought it because it was a brilliant investment. My humiliation was just a side effect of my own shallow judgments. Our life is different now, not because we have more, but because I finally understand the value of what I've had all along. I'm still at Northgate, but I no longer see it as a stage to perform on. I see it as a business, my husband's business. And I've learned that the most valuable asset isn't the golf course or the clubhouse. It's the quiet, underestimated person sitting right next to you, watching, waiting, and planning. What do you think? Was this the ultimate wake-up call or an unforgivable deception? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe for more.